Here I am, talking into a mic, playing old Black Ops while everyone else seems to be hustling to nowhere. Maybe this is therapy with kill streaks, or maybe it's just me trying to figure out if there's more to life than this. I keep thinking about this phrase. Nobody wants a job. Not in the way we talk about jobs now, at least. Not when it means sacrificing most of your hours, your sanity, just so you can afford a one bedroom and the occasional fast food order if you're lucky. You ask around and people will tell you, that's just life, man. Got to get your bread somehow. But that's just a polite way of saying, settle for less than you wanted and pray you win the lottery. It's not even that all work is bad. There are jobs out there that give people purpose, if you're lucky. But for most of us, those jobs are rare. The ones that pay enough to live and don't make you feel like you're melting from the inside out, yeah, those are either gone, gig kept, or they pay you like you're volunteering for a school project. If you want to feel useful, like you're doing something that matters, the world will usually ask you to do it for free or for minimum wage, which, honestly, is almost the same thing. I've had a handful of those real jobs, retail, customer support, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Every job interview felt like an audition for a role I didn't want, pretending to be someone I wasn't, hoping they wouldn't notice how dead behind the eyes I felt. Smile, nod, show enthusiasm, but not too much. Be yourself, but not the parts of yourself that are tired or burnt out or angry. I never realized how much of adulthood is just pretending. But it's more than that. This system is built on the idea that work should be the center of your life. That's the American dream, right? Get a degree, get a job, grind until you can maybe retire in your 60s if the climate apocalypse or pandemic doesn't get you first. But for Gen Z, it's like we see the ending to the story. And it's not a happy one. You spend your best years in a cubicle, trading time for money, hoping you don't get laid off in the next round of company restructuring. The only difference between you and the last guy is which streaming service you subscribe to and how much your rent goes up this year. People say Gen Z just needs to work harder. I see that in articles, in comment sections, and the way older relatives look at me when I mention freelance work or the idea of not having a 9 to 5. But what does harder even mean when wages haven't kept up with the price of everything else? What's the point of hustling when the ladder is missing most of its rungs? I read that almost half of Gen Z lost their job or had their pay cut during the pandemic. A third say home ownership is impossible, not in 10 or 20 years, but in their lifetime. Imagine being 25 and thinking, yeah, I'll probably never own a house. That's not laziness, that's math. You see people making memes about it, joking about living at home, about eating ramen, about their roommate's roommate. But there's pain behind that. There's that moment in the soup aisle, holding a can, wondering if it's really worth $2.99, running through your bank balance in your head like you're defusing a bomb. You scroll through social media, and everyone's flexing success, but in real life, almost everyone I know is one unexpected bill away from panic. There's this clip I saw, someone talking about wealth inequality. The part that hit me was, we're living in a slow-motion hostage situation. And honestly, that's what it feels like. You work, you save, you hope you can keep up, and then the system shifts again and you're back at zero. Meanwhile, you see billionaires posting about optimizing your mindset or whatever, and it's like, man, I just want to afford groceries without checking my credit card limit. Even in the best case scenario, if you do everything right, get the degree, get the job, save a little, there's still this background anxiety. Like, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? Most of the people I know aren't dreaming anymore, they're just coping. They're not planning for the future. They're hoping to survive the present. And honestly, I don't blame anyone for stepping off the treadmill, for saying no thanks to a system that doesn't care if you burn out. That's not laziness. That's refusing to light yourself on fire just to keep the lights on in someone else's office. Sometimes I think about how our tools became our masters. You know, like the job was supposed to give you security, but now you work just to keep the job. Work became the purpose, not the means. Henry David Thoreau wrote about men becoming tools of their tools, and that was before smartphones and Slack notifications and bosses who can ping you at 9 p.m. What would he say about now? About the infinite scroll, the hustle posts, the always available culture? Probably just laugh and go back to his cabin. There's this idea that modern life is a trap. I get that. But the trap isn't the work itself. It's the way the work fills every corner of your brain until you forget there was ever anything else. But you know what? More and more, people my age are refusing to play along. They're looking for something outside the grind. And honestly, I think that's the most hopeful thing I've seen in a long time. I saw a stat that 98% of Gen Z workers are dealing with burnout. 98%. I mean, what does that even look like practically? Is it just everyone walking around with the same tired eyes, making dark jokes in the break room, and trying to figure out how many sick days they can use without getting fired? Or is it something quieter, like that sense that you're always behind, even when you're working 3 jobs at once? Sometimes it feels like life is one big group project and everyone's waiting for someone else to pick up the slack. But the thing is, no one's got any slack left. Everyone's grinding, juggling side hustles, applying for gigs, trying to brand themselves on LinkedIn, just so maybe they can get enough hours next month to pay rent and keep the lights on. And yet, the world still looks at us and says, you just need to work harder. It's almost funny in a dark way. The people saying that could afford to buy a house on a single income. Now, even a decent job doesn't guarantee you won't be living with roommates into your 30s. I read this thing. In 1972, you could get by on minimum wage or a union job and still have options, still make decisions about your life. Try doing that now. Seriously, try it. The numbers don't work. But the older generations don't want to hear it. For them, hard work was the way up. Now it feels like we're stuck in a system that's not just broken, it's actively hostile. You get told to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but they forgot to mention they sold the boots on eBay for rent money. And what's wild is, if you talk about this stuff, you get labeled as lazy, whiny, entitled. There's always that one person who says, you're just not grateful enough. My first job was flipping burgers and I loved it. Cool, man. Good for you. But the reality is the math doesn't add up anymore. People are redefining success. Success doesn't mean climbing the corporate ladder. It means finding a little peace, maybe some time to yourself, maybe a job that doesn't drain you entirely. You know what else is funny? Even the jobs that people say are good come with a catch. You get more money, but also more hours, more emails, more performance reviews, more ways to measure how much of yourself you've given up for the company. And if you ever drop the act, if you're not smiling enough, or if you're too real, or you forget to call your boss sir, suddenly you're the problem. It's like the system is designed to squeeze every drop of energy out of you, just enough serotonin to keep you from losing your mind, but not enough to actually enjoy your life. There's this joke going around. The only thing worse than your boss knowing you want to quit is your boss knowing you can't. That's the trap. Everyone feels replaceable, disposable. You could disappear tomorrow, and the company would send a group email saying best wishes, and start looking for your replacement before you even clear out your desk. And then there's the burnout, the way it sneaks up on you. You start off just tired, then it's hard to care, then you're Googling symptoms at 3 a.m., wondering if this is just adulthood or if you're actually falling apart. Some people keep going, others just stop, quietly, suddenly. They join the growing number of NEETs, not in employment, education, or training. People have opted out, not because they're lazy, but because at some point you just run out of fuel. There are all these headlines about Gen Z being difficult, at work, unprofessional, unprepared, but no one wants to talk about why. No one wants to talk about how we were told to go to college, rack up debt, then got thrown into a job market where even having a degree doesn't guarantee you won't be making lattes at 26. They talk about etiquette and dress codes and professionalism as if that's the problem. But the real problem is way deeper. It's systemic, it's economic, and honestly, it's existential. It's weird because part of me wants to defend Gen Z like, no, we're not lazy, we're just awake. But another part of me is just tired. Tired of the blame, tired of pretending things are fine, tired of acting like one more side hustle is going to fix what's broken. But I get it. I get why some of us just walk away. Why some people would rather risk unemployment than grind themselves into dust for a job that treats them like they're interchangeable. There's even data showing more Gen Z are choosing unemployment over 9-to-5s because at some point, your soul is worth more than a paycheck. Or at least you want to believe it is. You know, sometimes I wonder if we're all just chickens in a coop, occasionally screaming, not because we want to, but because we don't know what else to do. Or maybe we're bank robbers in another life, just looking for some way to break out of the loop. The world says, just keep your head down and be grateful. But it's hard to be grateful when you're always one rent hike away from panic. Still, I don't want to leave this on a note of despair. The best thing about Gen Z is that we're not just accepting things the way they are. We're asking questions. We're saying no when the world tells us to say yes. And maybe, just maybe, that's the first step toward building something better. There's this word I keep seeing in articles and videos, NEET. Not in education, employment, or training. It sounds clinical, like a medical diagnosis. But behind every statistic is a real person, sitting in their room, staring at the ceiling, maybe wondering if they're broken or just awake in a world that feels fundamentally off. If you told someone a decade ago that a huge chunk of young people, men and women, would just tap out of the system, they'd have laughed it off as laziness or failure. Now, it's everywhere. More and more, you see people online talking openly about dropping out, not because they want to, but because they don't see a way forward that doesn't eat them alive. And the responses are predictable. Boomers love to say, get a job, any job. When I was your age, I was grateful for the opportunity to work, but gratitude doesn't pay the bills. You can work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and still come up short, especially if your rent goes up $200 overnight, or you have to decide between groceries and a doctor visit. The ladder they climbed just doesn't exist anymore, or it's so broken that climbing it feels like a joke. I hear all the time, nobody wants to work, but maybe it's just that nobody wants to trade their whole life for a handful of scraps. There's this running joke online, if you gave people the choice to get paid the same for doing nothing or keep their 9-to-5, literally everyone would take the first option. And honestly, I think that says more about the work than it does about us. Sometimes I see people romanticizing the old jobs, the good jobs, teachers, welders, carpenters, doctors, but even those are loaded down with stress, bureaucracy, low pay, or impossible expectations. It's not about loving the job, it's about having to trade so much of yourself for the bare minimum in return. Even the people who do their work for the love of it are exhausted, and if you can't handle it, if you tap out, even temporarily, the shame is unreal. You get side eyed at family gatherings. You see the comments online. Must be nice living off your parents. Wait till real life hits you. But real life already hit. That's why so many of us are coasting, living at home longer, stacking up roommates, taking the side gigs, the freelance work, anything that gives you a little breathing room from the grind. Is it fun being unemployed? Not really. Unless you're lucky enough to have a safety net, it's anxiety on loop. But it's still better than watching yourself dissolve in a job that feels pointless, or worse, in a job where you're constantly reminded how replaceable you are. The worst part is knowing that even if you play by all the rules, you're still one bad week away from disaster. There's a whole subculture online now. People sharing tips for getting by with less, for hacking the system, for finding joy in little things. It's not about being lazy. It's about survival, about refusing to be gaslit by a system that calls you entitled for wanting a life that's more than just working until you die. You see it in the memes, in the dark jokes, in the TikToks of people pretending to rob banks or go feral just to break out of the routine. I get that, honestly. Some days I feel more like the chicken screaming in the coop than a productive member of society. Other days, I'm just tired. But there's something defiant about it, too. Like, if the game is rigged, why should I keep playing by the rules? It's easy to feel like a failure in this economy, in this culture. There's always another productivity hack, another side hustle, another list of top 10 jobs for Gen Z that make it sound like if you're not winning, it's because you're not trying hard enough. But I think more people are seeing through it. The metrics, the constant competition, the idea that your whole value is tied to your output more and more, we're calling BS. Maybe that's why so many of us are looking for different ways to live. Not just quitting jobs, but quitting the idea that your life is only valuable if it's spent grinding. I know people who live with less and seem happier for it. People who left high-paying jobs for less stress. People who are redefining what it means to succeed. Maybe the system isn't going to change overnight, but at least we're naming the problem. We're refusing to be quiet about it. I'm not saying there's a perfect answer. There's no magic path. I'm not about to start selling some hustle course or financial freedom ebook. Honestly, I don't know what the way out looks like, but I do know that I'm not alone in feeling like this. And that's the start of something. Maybe not a revolution, but at least a shift. Maybe, just maybe, the end of the 9 to 5 for Gen Z isn't about giving up. Maybe it's about waking up. Sometimes I try to picture what the future could actually look like if we keep going down this road. Everyone hustling themselves to exhaustion, burning out in their 20s, hoping for a break that never really comes. But I also see the other side, more people opting out, building weird, creative lives, taking the leap into the unknown just because the known isn't working. The headlines call it the death of the 9 to 5 like it's some tragedy. But honestly, it feels more like the end of a bad sitcom. Finally, mercifully, fading out after way too many reruns. It's not that Gen Z doesn't want to work. We want to live. We want time that actually feels like ours, work that means something, even if it doesn't always pay a lot. We want some sense that all this effort is adding up to more than just a slightly better apartment or a fancier job title on LinkedIn. The alternatives aren't always glamorous. A lot of the time, they're just different. Freelance gigs, remote work, a patchwork of jobs that maybe don't make sense on a resume but keep you sane. Side projects, small businesses, making art, streaming, even just working less and living more simply. None of it is perfect. Sometimes it feels unstable. Sometimes you worry you're falling behind. But at least you're not slowly fading into the background of someone else's dream. There's hope in that. Not the fake kind, not the just manifest it kind, but the gritty, tired hope that comes from knowing you're not the only one who feels this way. When I talk to friends, when I scroll through comments, I see the same exhaustion, the same quiet rebellion. I see people supporting each other, sharing job leads, venting about bad bosses, laughing at the absurdity of it all. I see people being honest about what hurts, what scares them, what they actually want. And there's something powerful in that honesty. Maybe the system isn't built for us. Maybe it never was. But that doesn't mean we have to play along forever. The more we talk about it, the more we push back, the more space there is to imagine something better, even if it's just a little better for now. There's this scene I keep coming back to, me at 3 a.m., headset off, game paused, just sitting. The world is quiet for a second. No pings, no emails, no urgent notifications. Just me, breathing. And I think about all the people doing the same thing, wondering, dreaming, worrying. And I realize none of us is really alone in this. This video isn't advice. It's not a roadmap. It's just a voice in the dark saying, yeah, it's weird and it's hard and it doesn't always make sense. But you're not broken for wanting out. You're not lazy for wanting more. You're not alone for feeling like there's got to be another way. If you're here, if you've listened this far, even if you just had this on in the background, thanks. Thanks for not giving up. Thanks for making space for these conversations. Thanks for being part of the weird, tired, hopeful crew that refuses to settle for the script we were handed. Maybe the end of the 9 to 5 isn't the end of anything worth mourning. Maybe it's the beginning of something we get to build ourselves. One small act of rebellion, one honest conversation, one weird little life at a time. Anyway, that's all I've got. Take care of yourself. I'll be here playing old Black Ops, thinking out loud, keeping the controller warm for anyone who needs to hear this. Catch you next time.